Okay, good morning everyone. I would like to thank Bob for the invitation to talk about my PhD thesis, and I will try to give insight on how I personally perceive horses. But first, I will start with a little bit of context on why I've started this PhD thesis in music information retrieval. So first, a little insight on the musical industry. Here in this plot, there is a world revenue for, according to the year, for the physical sales and the digital sales. And you can see that recently, like in 2015, digital sales have overcome physical sales in world revenues. So it's starting to become very important to have more ways to recommend music to people, and because less and less people are buying physical sales. So the industry is trying to have some budget, some funding for this type of recommendation. So for example, I give here Deezer and Spotify, but there are many, many others. So how can they make people listen to music, and how can they have some income? So the main thing is streaming. It's music streaming. For example, they have recommendation. If you listen to Elvis Presley, they can recommend you B.B. King, for example. But another tool they use to make you listen to music is playlist. Like they propose to you theme-based playlist. For example, gender or mood or activities, and even they have celebrities playlist. So what Obama is listening to on Spotify, for example. But in both tools for recommendation and playlist, they really need to tag tracks with information in order to generate such recommendation or such playlist. In order to do such music tagging, first the editors try to make some manual annotation. This is the case with Pandora. The main advantage is that it's really precise because they are knowledge, they are like musicians or they are really expert in music, so it's really great. But the main drawback is that there is very little information, very little cover on the whole data set that exists in the real world. Second is you say, okay, I want to crowdsource the auto-tagging process and make the community do it. For example, on SoundCloud and Last.fm. So we got plenty of annotations, but the main drawbacks are there are some incorrect tags, some ambiguous tags, or some abuse. For example, if I want to promote my music on SoundCloud or Last.fm, I can just put every tag that exists and I will be on top of the search results on Google. So we have to make something with this kind of abuse. And the last thing that interests me the most is the automatic tagging of music. The first one use what our user listening to. So the advantage is like it's really precise, but we still have a problem with coverage, because if I listen to Elvis Presley and then B.B. King, someone else who is listening to Elvis Presley will be recommended B.B. King, but the algorithm just uses the data usage of different users. So if I have a new artist coming up, he doesn't have any, no one have listened to his song yet, so we can recommend this artist and his songs. And the last method is the automatic tagging with an algorithm that extracts music features from the signal. And we got an advantage because you just have to launch the algorithm on the database, and so we can treat every music we have. But the main drawback currently is the precision of such algorithms. So the goal of my PhD is to enhance auto-tagging for music recommendations, and I currently focus on instrumentals and songs. I will explain later why. So I mainly use database management for the music. Then I make feature extraction with signal processing. Then machine learning, and I use statistical analysis to see if my algorithms are working well. I set up some industrial partnership with 3 French companies that provide me data to analyze. So this is the goal of my PhD thesis. So I would like to have a beautiful algorithm that can distinguish instrumentals and songs. But how can I guarantee that the methods I produce are horse-free, if I can say that. So, first example is a song instrumental classification. I will show here the precision just for the instrumental detection. For example, Guillaume and his team just produced an algorithm in 2014 which tried to classify instrumentals and song, and they have 82% of precision on instrumental detection on a data set of like 2,000 tracks. I tried to replicate this experiment, I tried to replicate their algorithm on another data set, which is 25 times bigger, with the data set I produced, and I got a precision of 12.5%. So it's kind of hard to have such kind of precision. Moreover, this is just like near the random prediction. So, what is going on? Just a little insight. The random prediction is at 11% because instrumentals are not the majority, does not represent the majority of music tracks. It's like between 10 and 15% in the real world. If you go on Deezer, on Spotify, or on Pandora, there, instrumentals can find around 10 and 15%. And in my database that I named Satan, there is 11% of instrumental tracks. So I propose an algorithm in this year that reaches a better precision. But what is the main difference between my algorithm and their algorithm? The main difference concerns the features. They have 68 features per track. That is to say, on an instrumental of, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 minutes, you have only 60 features to describe what is going on. And I propose something else that describes more precisely what is going on at the frame level. So every tenth of milliseconds, is there instrumentals, is there only instrumentals, or is there people singing or whatever? And doing some smoothing about this prediction at frame level, I have a better track level prediction. But I use a bigger data set. So is a bigger data set really better for reducing the hoarseness of an algorithm? First, it is sure that we need to diversify the data set from to have different sources to make cross data set comparison and to have samples that are representative. For example, in this data set, there is less than 2,000 tracks, and I don't know which kind of genders are represented or which artists. But if I try to increase the size of my data set, maybe I can have some better analysis on different genders, different artists, on different instrumental or singing style, for example. Moreover, to have a bigger data set it's better for deep learning approaches because deep learning really requires a lot of data in input. And that's why in the image research field there was a huge improvement, a huge breakthrough in the classification processes because of the computation process necessary for deep learning approaches, but also there's a huge breakthrough because of the size of the data set that is used. We are around 2 billion images used for classification tasks. Just to give you a comparison, for example, Deezer proposes 40 million tracks. Let's say this is all we have in real world, so it's far less than we have in the image research field. And moreover, the tracks are under copyright, so we cannot use all of these tracks. Another example is acoustic brains, which have just find a way to provide audio features for all the tracks, but they don't have copyright on that because they don't provide the audio. They only provide the features for the tracks. So there are around 2.7 million tracks. So it's pretty great for audio analysis, but it's still complicated to make some new processing or new feature extraction algorithm because such features are pre-computed. So you cannot propose new features. On top of that, you can only enhance the machine learning algorithm. And lastly, the biggest audio data set you can have for currently is a folk music folk music audio set, which is composed of around 100,000 tracks, which is readily available for the MIR community. But in my dataset setting, how can I be sure that here I don't have a horse, and maybe if someone just increased by 25 the dataset, he will have, if he tries to reproduce my algorithm, he will have also a random prediction. So here, just a little insight on my dataset. There is bias toward Western music. So it's the first problem to take into account. Second problem concerns concerning the recent music, because I only have, not only, but I have a big bias toward recent music. So if I try to go earlier in time, I don't have a lot of classical music, for example. And finally, something I'm pretty, which is pretty good, is that I try to reduce the gender bias because I have a lot of gender that are represented. So bigger data set seems to be better because I get more tags, so I can reduce some hoarseness in my methods. But it's become complicated because the dataset must not be too big. For example, Dan talked about, he highlighted some problem with artist filtering. So if I have all the tracks on Deezer, I also have all the albums of Michael Jackson, for example. So how can I be sure that I have a precise analysis on what is really an instrumental song and not, okay, just I have instrumentals, which is only jazz instrumentals, and my algorithm is just differentiating jazz instrumentals with rock, with lyrics, for example. So I really recommend to the Flexer article on artist filtering, which give insight on how to detect studio recordings, how to detect mastering signature in the album. But I would like to say up to which point I need to filter my dataset. And this is current research I'm trying to make. But in this point, because if I increase a lot my dataset, I will have to filter a lot, or can I have just one artist, one song per artist in my training set, and have all of the rest of the dataset in the testing set? I don't know for the moment. I'm just trying to make some experiments. But I would like to make some comparison, because if my algorithm can distinguish some albums, can just use the album cues to distinguish between instrumentals and song, it's okay, but can I compare with human performances? For example, Michael Jackson is pretty well known, but if I take an unknown artist and I ask a random human, a random listener to listen to 2 albums from the same artist, is he able to do so? So this is kind of question I try to answer in my thesis. Another problem is that filtering reduces the size of the dataset. So, as Dan highlighted it too, we need to make some data augmentation because of 2 reasons. The first reason is that we have copyright restriction on the side of the dataset, and filtering reduces it even more. So we need to artificially increase the dataset. In music, it's pretty straightforward. We can just change the pitch. If I had someone singing, and I just change the pitch, I still have the same ground truth. It's still a song with someone singing, and a human can detect that someone is singing this song. And I too recommend the McPhee article, which provides a beautiful software on GitHub to make some data augmentation while preserving the ground truth. For example, if you make some variation on the speed, and you get a 5-minute song and you make it a 10-minute song, you still have ground truth at frame level that needs to be modified as well. So it has a beautiful toolbox to do so. And I'm currently trying to add to this toolbox a files-based data augmentation, which is not currently present, and which could be used for as input to neural networks. because currently the main input used are spectrograms, which are images, and I would like to see if raw signal as input also have good performances with neural networks. Another insight I would like to have on how to detect horses in music information retrieval methods concerns human annotations. We got a big problem of objective and subjective tag, because if I take a whole song and I try to say, okay, this song contains singing voices, for example, I think it's pretty straightforward, because instrumental and song are two mutually exclusive tags. But if I try to take gender and I say, okay, here the annotators A, which try to identify the gender in the song, you will say that maybe in the introduction it is more like a rock song, but in the solo it's more like jazzy. So I will have a different annotation from another annotators who will say, okay, this is in my whole song, I will annotate it as rock. So how to deal with such different annotation at different level in the song? Another article from McPhee tried to not have a unique ground truth, but tried to make some uniformization and to have to like a ground truth which is like the L measure, a floating point between 0 and 1, like the probability that this part of the track is more jazzy or more like a rock song. And that's why I first focus on instrumental and song, which is like vocals and non-vocals, because this is well-defined tag, and this is like more or less more objective than gender or mood, for example. But if I go back a little bit and just try to make some definition, a song is a short poem or a set of words set to music or meant to be sung. Just going from this definition, I got a little problem, because I will make you hear a little sound, and this sound is not a short poem nor a set of words, but is produced by the human voices. So how can I characterize it? Is it instrumental or a song? So is this a song or an instrumental piece? Because there are people singing. So I make some notes, and because also the voice is an instrument. So I think a song is more like a musical piece containing singing human voices, whereas an instrumental does not. And this was a sound examples from Joe Satriani, and I got another example that is also interesting. So which is more about how do we perceive sound as objectives or subjectives. Okay. Now I would like to know how can we measure the hoarseness of an algorithm. Do we compare to a baseline, and which baseline? Because if I compare to ground truths made by human, like the human detection performances, how can I do with that, with this kind of video, for example? Another example is like, do I just compare to a random classification and say, okay, my data set is evenly distributed, and I just say, okay, random is 50%, the ideal case is 100%, and I just have my algorithm just try to make closer to 100% of precision? Or maybe I can just input some random signal in my algorithm and just wait for it to have some prediction and say, okay, if I input random in my system and I got 70% of precision, maybe I've got a horse. And I really recommend in all fields, not only in my field, to just give a look at this project, which tries to compare every algorithm in every task and to compare every performance of each algorithm to the human detection performances. And yeah, the slide will be on internet, so you can click on the link to have more info about it. But here is a sample of what you can find. So here is the image recognition task. You have the percentage of precision that are produced by the different algorithms, which are represented by red dots, according to the years. You can see that blue dots are algorithms that make better than human performances. So it's a very good project to check and maybe to include what you're going on. So it's pretty great to have some good insight on a topic really quickly. This is about the metrics. Just to get some a little bit a recall. If I have a data set with songs and instrumentals, I have detected some stuff, and my methods also detect that some songs are instrumentals. Most of the time, people just use precision and recall to compare algorithm and say, okay, my algorithm have a better precision, so I got a better method, and maybe I have less horses. But we have to take care of this kind of metrics because, for example, in medicine, I think that it's more important to take care of the false negative because we don't really want to miss a cancer patient, for example, and it's really important to focus on this kind of stuff. But in music recommendation, I would like to produce the better recommendation and the better playlist to the users. So I just want to minimize the false positives. So just it's like a little checklist to diminish the horselessness. We have to check the metrics for the moment with statistics and mathematics, but you can also use like subjective experiments and just tell users to listen to the generated playlist by your algorithm and say, okay, do you think it's a great playlist around the theme rock or around the theme instrumentals? But the main problem with this kind of experiments is like we have subjective annotation, we have subjective tags, and we have subjective validation at the end. So it's starting to add maybe too much subjective information. And for the moment, I'm more trying to make some statistical analysis and not doing so much user listening experiments. So how can we check the results? And how can we check that our machine learning is really learning something? And for example, it's not learning only to detect the album, for example. We can maybe just, as we do in image processing, do the same in audio, like analyze the layers of our deep learning algorithm, analyze a layer of the neural networks, and just try to look at the spectrogram, to try to analyze the sound, and to see, okay, maybe in this step, he really recognizes the singing voice, for example. And with this kind of tool, we can really be sure that, not really sure, but we can diminish the horse risk. And finally, I would like just to make a little point about reproducibility and replicability. I think this is very, very important in our field because when I tried to start my PhD, I don't have much algorithm that was proposed, and I have to record, to implement such methods, and it was pretty. It was not straightforward, and a lot of new music information retrieval methods that are proposed currently, even with neural networks, don't have this kind of replication, and they have some results that we cannot reproduce. We cannot analyze and have more insight on what is really going on and what the deep learning is really learning on the audio signal. So just to give some references there, and I will be quick, just jump on the conclusion. But here are really beautiful links that I really recommend on reproducible research. And a little conclusion, which is more like to some ideas. This is some checkpoints that I just try to use for my PhD to have my method working great, and just say, okay, this is the best method I can produce, and I really try to reduce the horse, but maybe we have some little bit problem elsewhere, but just trying to do so, I hope to diminish the hoarseness of my algorithm and produce some good recommendation and beautiful instrumental plays. I thank you for your attention and listen to your question.